All right, good morning. Move a little bit here. That's a good spot, I think, looking at the camera and stuff. This is May 24th, 2020, and I'm going to spend some time in Hebrews chapter 3. Hebrews chapter 3, I should be able to finish Hebrews chapter 3 today. Looks like all the equipment is operating pretty good as I glance out of the corner of my eye over here. Hope that you all are doing well. I finally sent out an email this morning to the people who are on my list to just like 5 minutes ago. I want to do this every morning, but unfortunately life just can get kind of busy. If you'd like to get the pre-presentation email that I send out, you need to go to aaronbudjen.net and request a login. Request a login over there and follow the directions there. I need to know who you are, that kind of thing. Otherwise, it's okay. You don't need to get it. But that's something that I can do to try to stay connected with folks a little bit better. And then I will be online to answer questions that you may have. This is something that I can do for you and for the small groups that are developing all over the world right now. You can, after I do this presentation live, I'll be available for a couple of hours to be of service in any way that I can to help you guys move along and move forward. If you get stuck with something related to the scriptures, your conversations, or whatever, sometimes it's easier to shift the burden of a topic over to someone else, especially when you're physically present with another person. Sometimes discussions can get a little heated and conflict can arise and stuff. I can be of service in that sense. You can shift those conversations over to me a little bit, in the morning. All right, so I'm in Hebrews chapter 3, and we're moving into a very important topic, as it relates to entering into the rest of God. The rest, and not the rest as in the whole rest or what's incomplete or unknown, but the rest in terms of living a life being at rest, being at peace, being able to function in every day without the magnitude of the stresses of life, or an increased magnitude of the burdens of a system of religious bondage, all right? That there is a rest to enter into. Now, in Hebrews chapter 3, I forgot exactly where it's at. Let's start out Hebrews chapter 3 around verse 4. It's just below that. Hebrews chapter 3, verse 4, "For every house is built by someone, but he who built all things is God. And Moses indeed was faithful in all his house," all of God's house, "as a servant for a testimony of those things which would be spoken afterward. But Christ as a son over his own house, whose house we are, if we hold fast," which is better understood as "inasmuch as we hold fast and the rejoicing of the hope firm to the end." And I've explained in the previous several weeks that this end, inasmuch as we hold fast to that, the end is to the point of salvation, to the point of being saved, as the writer is trying to encourage people to either embrace or to grow further in their faith, for those who had not quite yet embraced the faith. But here, what I'm going to emphasize this morning is what he says here at the end of verse 5, where he states, "For a testimony of those things which would be spoken afterwards." All right? That Moses was faithful and he did his part, but there is another part. There is something else that happens after that. Okay? This is a simple way to understand this. Well, sometimes, when I have conversations with people, a person contacts me for the first time, normally through the Living God Ministries website, through the email system there, to send a message to staff, and it gets processed. Everything gets sent to me, or to the pastor's email address, and I have others to help me out in the case that it gets overflowed a little bit there. But the point is that people contact me and they'll ask me a question, and depending upon the nature of the question, it's not uncommon for myself or someone else to ask the question, "Tell me a little bit about your background. Tell me where you're coming from. Tell me about the history that you have had, just a little bit, in terms of your pursuit of discovering your God." And if a person replies and says, well, I come from a Catholic background, then, I will sometimes adjust the way that I respond to them, depending on their question, that would be a little bit easier for someone who has a Catholic background to understand. I can use terms or I can avoid terms. I will use language that is something that they can relate to better than other language that they could perhaps relate to. Or if someone says, I come from a Pentecostal background, you come from one of those and that's your thing, then again, I'm not going to communicate with you probably as if you have a Catholic background. Or if you have no history in the faith whatsoever. That sometimes is the easiest because I don't have as many obstacles to work through most of the time to try to help a person kind of undo a few things that they may have been holding on to. But what I want you to understand is that I use what I have, we use what we have in terms of our history, of our knowledge base, of our vocabulary, of our education, of the challenges that we have been through, that we have struggled through in our lives. We use these things as a foundationary base in order to continue a conversation and to enable this conversation to be a little bit more productive. And we will often use these things as people communicate with each other. We will often use these things to help us describe other things by making comparisons where we can say things like, this is what you were exposed to before, but this is something that is different. And I can speak about the new thing as I compare it with the old thing. All right? A very common thing for me to say with regards to people who are absolutely devoted to a life of repentance and obedience, from a religious point of view, I will ask them the question, well, have you noticed that it's not working for you? And if the answer is yes, then we can proceed and we can talk about other things after that. But if they say, no, I haven't noticed that it isn't really working for me, then I will say, well, then you need to try it harder. You need to be doing it more. You need to be more devoted, more committed. I don't think, this is one of my favorite ones that I like to use when people get a little rough with me, I don't think you're being very honest with me about your sincerity to be right with God. I don't think you're being very honest. You can be more obedient. You can. You can repent better. You can. You do it. And then get back with me when you realize that it's not working for you. All right? But my point is that we often have to use a foundation of things, in terms of how we can relate to each other. I've been talking with someone last couple of days, for example, who has no background whatsoever. There's no chance that I would encourage them to watch and listen to what I'm presenting this morning. They're just simply not ready for the magnitude of what I'm describing. There's lots of other things that are available that they can listen to that I've produced. And watch, listen to the audio files that are at the Living God Ministries website, or there's some of the videos that are posted on this channel and on the other channel, Aaron Budjen channel. There's other places to go. But, I'm proceeding, I'm moving on, and I'm making assumptions about who is watching this. Okay? Now, the Lord is making this transition of entering into his rest. And what he uses to describe the entering into his rest is he uses the law of Moses. The law of Moses. And he's going to use the Sabbath law. The law with regards to not working from the moment when there are 3 stars visible in the sky on Friday evening until the moment where there are 3 stars visible in the sky on Saturday evening. Then you do not buy or sell and you do not do any work. He's going to use that in order to describe another kind of rest. So Moses was very faithful in the work of God, in the house of God, in the building of the body of Christ today. Moses was very faithful in his role to present the topic of the Sabbath law. Very important role, extremely important, but we are going to use that. Our God has used that in order to describe another rest. All right, so this is a kind of a big deal for me personally, because I come from a rabbinical Jewish background, and there was a time in my life when I was fully committed to living in obedience to the Mosaic law, and the Sabbath law was on my list among, lots of others. That this was going to be my commitment, my life, my devotion. To let go of it in that context in order to embrace the other kind of rest was a big deal. That was a big deal for me. And so this is kind of a sensitive one for myself. Others, they can relate to that in different ways. There are some people who can relate to that from the perspective of Sundays. On Sunday morning or on Sundays, you don't do any work, you don't go to the store, you just go to church and do some family things, and then that's it, which is perfectly fine. I wouldn't want to take that away from anybody. But for a person to do something like that with the belief, the sincere belief that this is the rest that God has called them to, they're missing out. They don't understand. They don't know. But we can use that. We can use that the same way that we use the Saturday Sabbath law. We could use the Christian Sabbath law of Sunday in the same way to say there is another rest to enter into. Now here in chapter 3, in Hebrews chapter 3, we have several statements that refer to the significance of belief or unbelief. Several statements. I'm not going to look at them right now. You can see it there in chapter 3. Belief and unbelief. And he says that the people, the children of Israel, who he set free from Egypt and brought them to the mountain of God with Moses, they did not enter into the promised land because they did not believe God. They did not believe that he would be with them. They did not believe that he would conquer the people there, that he would be a part of their war, and that he would give the land to them. Now, what's interesting is that a lot of them, this is just a side note, a lot of them complained of the fact that he wasn't going to go with them afterwards, which could be considered to be maybe a manipulation. God, I just don't believe you. I don't think that you're really with us, as a manipulation. To say, I don't really believe you, but I'm testing you to see if you will respond and convince me or give me more encouragement or do some more miracles or something. Give me some more to go on so that I can believe that you really are going, so that we can believe that you're really going to go with us and you're going to be with us and that you do care about us. That's called a manipulation. And it's a very dishonest way of relating to another person. And it is a denial that God is a truthful person, which I think he would be very disturbed about. It's a way of saying that God is a liar by telling him we don't believe him, right? So there's a lot that can be included in the package of the unbelief of the Israelites. But he advertised the promised land as a form of entering into his rest. Spoke about that in a number of places. You can look through this in a Bible concordance under rest. Just look up the word rest and enter, and then you'll find some places where he spoke about this, that it was a form of entering into his rest. Now, when we think about it from that kind of a perspective, what kind of a rest was it? It was a rest that they would not have to dig wells, that they would be able to drink from wells that they did not dig. There would be a little bit more protection from the conflicts of war. Their children will not be consumed by wild animals. They would have plenty of flour in their kneading bowl. The rain will come in due season. That was the type of rest that the Lord was offering the Israelites, which is, that's a good thing. I can appreciate those kinds of things. But it's all about the flesh. It has nothing to do with the Spirit. It has nothing to do with knowing their God. It only has to do with resting from the magnitude of building civilization for themselves and in their lives, resting from the magnitude of that in some ways, in comparison with what they would have to go through if they were just going in and being absolute pioneers and starting from scratch there in the desert. All right, so the Lord used, and so what he did was he's now used this notion of entering into his rest with the examples of the Israelites. We now have a foundation of knowledge. We have a foundation of understanding. We have a foundation of purpose. And our God can now use this as a way of communicating with us about something else, about another form of rest. And this other form of rest is not about the flesh. It is about your soul. It is about your spirit. It is about your inner being. It is about the interactive relationship that exists now in accordance with the new covenant. All right? So that's the way to understand this and so many other topics that the Lord has provided for us. We are so fortunate to be in this time in history. This time in history, after he has already done so much, all of this over the previous 6,000 years or so. We have so much that he has given to us now and today that we can embrace, that we can learn about, we can discover, so that he can use these things to communicate to us so many other things, so many things that are so much greater than what others could have never begun, I don't think, could have ever even begun to begin to conceptualize, to embrace, and to live their lives with. All right, so we do live in a very unique time in history, and we should definitely remember that and be very thankful and appreciative for that, without question. All right, so we have we have this fantastic description here, and what he effectively says here with regards to unbelief and the hardening of hearts here in chapter 3. What he's saying here is that, look, it's the same thing with regards to the new covenant, in the sense that we will harden our hearts, we will not believe our God, and because of that, we will not enter into this other rest that he has called us to. Okay, now most of you who are viewing have got a background in religion, in whatever it may be, and it doesn't matter what it is because every type has got its own way of handling this. But I'm going to address it from that perspective for the moment and say that entering into his rest, for the most part, that most of you are accustomed to, is entering into his rest means that he has provided you with the definition of a way of life. Okay, he has provided you with a definition of a way of life so that if you will engage in this way of life, it will reduce the complications and the struggles and the problems of life that you would normally have or that you have had experienced before. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that. All right? I do. I don't want to take that away. But what I need to say is that the solution that people present, such that you may be able to enter in a new way of life, the solution that people present is they present a list of laws, a list of requirements, a list of things that you are to do and that you are not to do. You are provided with a definition of good and evil. You do that which is good, you do not do that which is evil, and through that, you will enter into his rest. All right, now to me, I disagree. I sincerely believe that entering into his rest comes in another way. It comes through what he has done, not through what you have done, are doing, or will do. All right, it's based on the reality of what he has already done for us, and how we embrace that and integrate that into our daily lives. That's where the rest comes at. Okay? But before I get there, let's continue on with the notion that people are told that there is a rest to enter into from a religious standpoint. But what they really mean, and they're not going to say this, nobody wants to say this, but it's all over the place, all right? Nobody wants to say it, but this is, I don't have time to give you the usual artful sermon on how to say it without not really saying it. What people really say is that you are to become a Christian so that you can enter into his work, not enter into his rest. That's really what people are pursuing, and what they are encouraging, and what people want for the most part. Most people want that. They want to enter in to his work, not enter in to his rest. Okay? And there's a lot of attraction to this, a lot of appeal to this. Certainly, just tell me what to do and I will do it. Tell me what not to do and I won't do that. Boy, it sounds so easy, doesn't it? That's entering in to his work. Okay, I had a life outside of church. Give me a life in church. I'm going to be at church every time the doors are open. That's it. That's entering in to his work. That's what that is. All right, I'm going to be at all the Bible studies that are available, or as many as I can handle. I'm going to do the praise and worship services all the time. Look, those are good things. I'm not going to take away from those. But when people pursue activity such as this as an exercise of obedience, and this is the good stuff I'm going to do for God, and in return, I'm going to enter into some kind of rest through either a reduction of sin or a reduction of problems and the complications of life, and that he is going to like me, he is going to approve of me, he's not going to be mad at me because I do these things. That is a definition of entering into his work, which is not what he has called us to in the new covenant. So if you're going to do those things, but you need to do them from a different point of view, with a different objective, different motive, a different condition of your heart, one that is more representative of what it means to believe in what he has done, instead of hoping that he will do something in response in your life. All right, so most people are accustomed to the idea of what I would call entering into his work, even though no one will ever want to say that. But in practical reality, that is how people live. They live in accordance with entering into his work with the expectation that they will obtain rest from there. Okay, so I wanted to try to start with that and make that pretty clear. All right, now let me follow through with this a little bit. So from an Israelite's point of view, entering into his work was what? It was the Mosaic law, and there is the definition of all that you are to do and all you are to observe. That was their form of entering into his work. From the Christian religious point of view, all right, the Christian Old Covenant point of view, entering into his work has to do with reducing the amount of sin in your life, which is a good thing, all right? But people do it differently. They do it not because they have entered into his rest, but they attempt to reduce the sin in their life because they live in terror. They live in fear. They live with an expectation that God will intervene and punish them for their failures of life, which is not how he relates to us in the New Covenant. Entering into his work is often described as performing service. You're going to serve God. This is another way that people share this with each other, is that you're going to, now that you're a Christian, to enter into his rest, which I believe means entering into his work. Entering into his rest, from that perspective, is to now, instead of being occupied with all those things that you should not be doing, now we have some other things that you can participate in. You know, I can't help but think this one church in my local area. I never really investigated too much about them, but I mean, this place is the classic absolute representation of what it means to live by service. You know, live by service and an absolute religious activity center or a religious entertainment center and all the things that go with it. And look, they do great things and they do draw people to the Lord. I wouldn't want to take that away, all right, even though they're not able to meet right now. But you know, I mean, they go so far. I mean, when I heard this, I couldn't take it. I lost it, all right? They go so far as they even have Christian exercise groups, all right? I mean, that to me is just way beyond where instead of going to some, you know, one particular exercise thing, like going to do yoga or work out with weights or join a running club or, you know, something like that, now they've got the Christian exercise group, you know, where everybody gets together and the first thing they do is they pray, you know, which nothing wrong with that, but the perspective is that we're here just to get some exercise and we're going to start with prayer. And you know, they got their Bible verses and everything, and then when they're done working out together, they pray. You know, I didn't go so far, but I would not be surprised if I found out that they even sung a little hymn afterwards. I'm exaggerating right now, probably. I hope not, but I could be. You know, and somebody gives a 5 or 10 minute message about, you know, obey God, you know, that kind of thing. I mean, you know, some places are really like that, you know, and it's just, to me, it truly is a representation of, you know, we believe that this is entering into his rest, but no, folks, that's entering into his work. Or entering into a work that you believe that through this, you're going to enter into his rest. But my goodness, what a burden. I mean, if you're going to exercise, just exercise, you know, just get over with. Do it and be done. I mean, why add all the magnitude, you know, magnitude of this, just unbelievable. You know, and the leadership who's engaged in that and so many other things that they have going on. The leadership associated with this, from their perspective, this is their act of service to God. This represents their maturity. This is what it means to be in the ministry. All right? Now look, I genuinely believe that through connecting with people and having people in their lives like that, you know, a person might have one of those special moments, a big transition in their relationship with God, and should the Lord use that, by all means, all right? I don't want to take that away, and I would be thankful, okay? I just think it's a little, I'm going to use this word, I don't use this word very often, but I'm going to call it a little extreme, okay? But what it is really is that this entire community is based on little miniature kingdoms. I would call it a fiefdom, you know, but really it's little miniature kingdoms where they've got this really weak pastor, you know. I mean, this guy is not a leader. He is not a man who really leads his people. That's not who he is. And they like him. They want him like that because that gives a little bit more liberty and freedom to all the other people who can then build their own little religious kingdoms and their own little sub-churches throughout the entire administration, and the pastor just has to make sure that nobody gets anybody into legal trouble. You know, that's most of what they seem to be occupied with. People are more concerned about the legal obstacles of their interactions and their relationships with people around them than they are concerned, or that they really are interested in having healthy relationships with one another. It's just another way of life, another way of understanding these things. Okay, but this is an example of what people think in terms of entering into service projects as a means of entering into his rest, but it's not. There is another rest that has nothing to do with such things. Those kinds of things can be good, useful, whatever. But in general, they end up being another form of bondage, another pathway of bondage that does not provide a person with the rest that he has called us to, all right? And that has to be followed up with continued discussion and continued examples, which I'm not going to do. I just have to stop there and proceed. All right? It could be just as simple. I got my notes over here. Could just be as simple in terms of entering into his work as, all right, now you've become a Christian. You've become a Christian, and so what does it mean to become a Christian? All right? Well, you got to go to church. Okay? You got to go to church, and you got to tithe. That's what it means to be a Christian. How do I know? Because of the enormous number of pastors who I've asked. All right? And lots of people who I've asked, well, okay, a person becomes a Christian, they become a believer. What are some of the first things that they should learn about? Some of the first things that we should work on, that they should know and understand. And it's go to church, and it's pay your tithes. That's what it means. All right, now this is a form of entering into work, not entering into rest. Going to church is a good thing. Donating to the ministry is a good thing, either because you're benefiting from it or what I prefer, because you want others to benefit and you want others to learn and grow in the same way that you have as a result of what someone else gave so that you could benefit from the work. So I'm not a person who generally believes in supporting someone who is serving you. In other words, if you want to donate to the work that I'm doing, please, if you want to do so because you are personally benefiting, I won't complain, and I'm fine with that. But I would generally prefer you to be thinking of it as, what am I going to do next? What am I going to do with the resources next in order to reach out to other people? That's kind of a preference. That's how I think of what I do more than anything. But when people are thinking about this from the perspective of what does it mean to enter into his rest, they are thinking that, okay, you've got a chair to sit in. Now you can sit in this chair and a person can teach you and do all the studying on your behalf and learn about God, and now they will tell you all that you need to know. You can be at rest now. That's what it means for some people to enter into his rest. That's not what our God has called us to, not even remotely. All right? Or just tithe, give the money and we can support this facility and all the programs associated with it, and you now have a religious activity community center, a religious entertainment center, whatever it is, and that this is a way of entering into his rest. You have the rest of someone else who will assume the responsibility of your discipleship. All right? And you have a form of rest by having a place to go that we will call the house of God, where you can dwell in peace. And for a lot of people, that's what it means to enter into his rest. That's not the rest that he has called us to. It just isn't. Okay? He has called us to something entirely different. Now, this can be a little bit of a challenge to begin to understand if you're not familiar with it, but I have to approach it from this kind of a perspective right now with everything that I've said. Okay, for me to describe a little bit about what it means to enter his rest, and there's so much to talk about and so much to grow in. You just have to absorb it a piece at a time, and over time, the whole topic will become more real to you if it's not right now. Have patience with it, in other words, and consider everything to kind of have a little piece or a little place in the experience of growing and discovering more of what it means to live in and to enter into his rest. Now, probably the biggest challenge that I have seen happen is not so much what I've spent so much time talking about right now, which was with regards to, entering into his work or entering into his rest, the work of religion, religious activity, service, trying to get your flesh under control, right? That's a big deal. But there's something else that I find to be a little bit more of an issue. But it's just that people don't think about it too much. But I'm going to put a little bit of time into this in order to help you understand another one of these big obstacles that people struggle with when it comes to entering into his rest. This has to do with the competition. And there is competition. There's a philosophical competition between the philosophy of the world and the truth of our God as a person. There's a big issue. There's a big complication in the sense of enormous competition between the philosophy of this world and the truth about our God, who is a living God, who is an active participant in our lives. There's a huge difference between the two, and it's important for you to have some exposure to it. Otherwise, entering into his rest is really tough. Okay? The philosophy of this world is heavily promoted through seminaries. It just is. Okay? That's just the way it is. But when you've got someone who goes and studies at a seminary, when you look at the curriculums and the topics and the things that people study at seminaries, which, look, I don't want to take it away. If people do that, if you do that, great. It's a wonderful thing. But a person will have to be confronted with this at some point in their life, that a lot of what is taught is philosophy that has been kind of Christianized. Okay? It's been kind of Christianized philosophy. In order to see this, it's important to study philosophy from a non-Christian perspective. And there are lots of books that have been written. There are courses that people have presented and done all over the place. You can buy them, or maybe somebody's got them available for free. But a simple course on just the general topic of philosophy is a great way to start. Okay, and most of what we see today is in Christianity, and what we see in our seminaries and what's being promoted is really a Christianized version of philosophy, of worldly philosophy that has a long history of thought. Okay? Now, one of the ways of understanding philosophy is to think of it as a fixed relationship, right? This morning, as I'm going to talk about it. Think about it as a fixed relationship. Okay, and so for those of you who are taking notes, you could say fixed relationship versus living relationship. I'm going to try to use those words. Or make up your own words, however you want to try to describe it, it doesn't matter. Or I don't want to create a new fad, in other words, of a new topic, a new definition, and people go run with it. I now have the new way, the new thing, the new buzzwords, fixed relationship or living relationship. Don't do that to me, okay? Or to yourself, or to others. All right, but in general, worldly philosophy, to include seminarial philosophy, has a lot to do with the definition of a fixed relationship. And when it comes to the subject of entering into his rest, you are allowed one transition in your life experience. All right? And this one transition is sometimes related to a person in the sense that, okay, once you were not saved, and now you are, and you have entered into his rest because of that. This kind of describes a fixed relationship. And some people will go so far as, you were created and born, and God just chose you as one person who would be in his rest, and you just had some moment of intellectual enlightenment where you acknowledged that this is the case, that you're one of the chosen of God, kind of thing. All right, that this is a worldly philosophical point of view that has been put together in a Christian package to appeal to those who are wanting to be Christians. All right, but this is what I would call a fixed relationship. And in this fixed relationship, because your salvation is secure, or because you're just one of those special people. There is a lot of appeal to this, where people can think of, well, I am in a fixed relationship with my God, and there's really not a lot of opportunity for change, not a lot of opportunity for growth. Or if it happens, it's only because God causes it to happen, and it has nothing to do with us at all. Now, there are a lot of ways that people believe this, describe this, say this, but that's how I'm going to handle it this morning for the sake of time. All right, that there's really no change, there's no participation with you. It's not really a participatory relationship. You get one transition. You enter into his rest in terms of being saved. You now have some kind of relationship with God. You're fixed, okay? And in this fixed experience, there's not really much available for change and growth. You're just now a Christian and just, go to church, sit in the chair, be preached to, make sure you give your tithes, and don't commit adultery, stuff like that. Okay? That's a fixed kind of relationship, a very fixed one. All right? But there's something else, and that is called a living relationship. And that is that we have a God who is a living God. And as a living God, he is very much a participant in people's lives. And in our lives, and being a member and a participant of this world, he experiences a lot of, not himself, but he experiences the changes and the growth that happens with us and within our lives. That as a living God, he will change and adapt to the decisions that we make, just as we may change and adapt to the decisions that he makes. Our lives are filled with all kinds of problems and obstacles and difficulties. Our lives are filled with that. And to be alive means that we are going to be confronted with these challenges and difficulties of life. We are to approach these from a growth point of view, that this is not just something that is happening to us. This is not something that we're just going to have to deal with. This is not just our destiny. This is not the providence of God. It's not about that at all. It's about, this is life. This is the way life is. And this is our life and our time in history. And this is what we get, all right? And this is to be looked at as an opportunity for growth, as an opportunity for change. That there's going to be dramatic change within you as a person, as you adapt, as you adjust, as you navigate through these challenges and difficulties that you are confronted with. That's what it means to be alive. It means that you are going to grow, that you are going to become someone different than who you are right now. And this is a good thing. And you have a God who sees you as someone who is growing, who is changing, who's going to enter into something new in the coming days, in the coming weeks, in the coming years. And he is a God who wants to be with you through it, who wants to participate with you through these challenges, difficulties, and obstacles. That's what it means to have a living relationship instead of a fixed relationship where you're just subject to whatever his will is for your life. All right? No, his will for your life is that you may experience challenges, difficulties, obstacles, and that you may grow through them. And in the midst of them, he is with you. He is relating to you. And in the midst of this relationship, as you are living your life, there are opportunities, little ones here and there, for you to discover more about who he is as a person, as you communicate with one another, either through the things that he has already said in the written word, or as things that he may share with you personally in the core of your spirit, as he opens your eyes and he opens your mind and he opens your soul and your heart to different ways of seeing the reality of life as you see things through his eyes and understand things through his wisdom. All right, this is a big deal. And this is the kind of thing that I believe a person we really must embrace in order to enter into his rest. Okay? Because entering into his rest doesn't mean that you don't have any problems anymore. Entering into his rest means that in the core of your being, you will have peace. You will be at rest in the midst of some of the most awful, horrific, terrible things that may go on in this world. Your flesh may be flooded with enormous problems and difficulties and challenges, but in your heart and in your spirit, you have a rest and peace because there is someone with you. You're not alone. There is a person with you who is experiencing these things with you, who is guiding you, who is giving you wisdom, giving you understanding, giving you perspective, and helping you to see more about himself in the midst of these things, more about the world that you are a participant in, with the expectation that you are going to grow. You are a living person as he is a living God, and you are to grow. Living things grow. Living things change. This is the way things are. And when a person decides, when you decide that you have some kind of fixed relationship with your God, and not a growing relationship, not a living relationship with your God, when you assume that you have some kind of fixed relationship with him, these things will never be real. It is an expression of unbelief. You don't believe that he is a participant in your life. You don't believe that? Well then, fine. What can he do with that? How can you enter into his rest? Is your rest? Are you at rest because this is just the will of God for you, as people would say it, or the providence for you, or this is just your destiny? You know, that's what it is. Is that really rest for you? You know, maybe because you're afraid. You're afraid of having a person who's real, who is a participant in your daily experience. Maybe you're afraid of that. Maybe you don't like the idea. Maybe you want a God out there somewhere who just throws some blessings your way on occasion. Maybe you want a God who's not really a participant. You know, maybe you want a God who has an intermediary, has a priest in between you and him. You want to keep him at a distance, maybe. Maybe you want a God of stone. How about that? You know, just a stone God who has no emotions, who has no feelings, who doesn't relate to you as a person. Maybe you genuinely want, maybe you feel safe that way. Maybe that is your form of entering into his rest. But that's not real. All right? That's not real. Or maybe you want a God somewhere out there in outer space who you'll meet one day when you physically die, and between now and then, he can keep his distance. It's not entering into the rest that he has for us. That's not it. All right, we have a God who is alive, who is real, and he wants to be a participant with you. Now, just as we can use things like the Sabbath law that was presented through Moses, we can use that to speak of another rest, to speak of another form of promised land, you know, from an abstract perspective. We can use these things in that way. So also to enter into his rest, to grow in a relationship with him, to experience the difference between a fixed relationship and a living relationship, these things happen in stages. These things happen over transitions. of discovering and believing fundamental truths, you must follow the path. And the path is narrow. You must follow the path. You must first even get through the door to see the path. The door that needs to be opened is the door of forgiveness. You must believe that the sin issue is over. You must believe that. You must believe and know that you are a new creation. You must know that you are a child of God. You must know some of what it means to be a child who has an inheritance that has been given to you by God. You must grow to understand what it means when he says he loves you. You need to know and understand and grow in what it means for when he says he accepts you. These are steps. These are stages. And the more you move in this direction, the more you will enter into his rest and not enter into what people will call, or what I call, his work. All right? There's a big difference between the Christian life of entering into his work versus the Christian life of entering into his rest. And there is only one way, and it is narrow, but it is a great way, even though it is the only way. All right? So that's my summary of this for the end of chapter 3, Hebrews chapter 3. And in Hebrews chapter 4, he approaches this from a bigger layer, another layer. The writer is doing this in layers, a little bit at a time, building on a little bit at a time. From chapter 3, we go into chapter 4, and he gets a little bit more aggressive about the comparison between the Sabbath law and the rest that we have in the new covenant. It becomes a little bit more aggressive with that. And so I will present Hebrews chapter 4 starting next week. I have a question for you to work off of. For those of you who are in groups with each other, either in person or online. Again, I'd like to ask that if you have a group of 6 or more, then please let me know that you're meeting, unless you told me last week and you don't need to do that. I know that's what you're doing, kind of thing. But it helps me to manage and understand the statistics. When I see that there are over 300 views, for example, throughout the week, I can calculate that to be a little over 500 people right now as a minimum. But I'd like to get a little closer for my own sake, just to understand what's happening right now. But I have a question here. How would you relate to the challenges of entering his rest or entering his work? All right. So I've talked with you this morning about how I would relate to that, of the challenges, some of the challenges and some of the difficulties of how you would see entering into his work or entering into his rest. If I use those words in that way, how would you relate to that? How would you hear that? How would you understand that because of your own personal circumstances in life of entering into his work as a Christian or entering into his rest? What were your struggles with this? It's just an open-ended question. I'm not requiring any particular specific answers, okay? So it's just something that you can use as a discussion question with each other, or come up with your own, whatever. It's just fine. Thank you for being here with me this morning. I really do appreciate it. I'll be available for another couple of hours. If you've got something for me, you can email me at aaron@aaronbudjen.net for this particular project, and I'll be of service in any way I can. Thank you.